A little while back, we talked about how Indiana doesn't have the world's strongest college football resume. And they don't. And I'll die on that hill. They don't have a super strong college football resume other than they have a 0 in the loss column. And there's nothing wrong with that. I don't think that you can argue really otherwise. That, you know what, no matter what Power 4 conference you are in, if after Veterans Day, if you've got a 0 in the loss column, you should probably be in contention for the college football playoff. But who has Indiana beaten? Nobody, really. Now they have, a pathway in front of them that should they be, and their best win is against Michigan, a Michigan team that's not any good, just flat out. They're not. They're 5-5, and the losses are. You could argue that, like, if Michigan were an SEC school, I think that the argument would be like, they lost to the number 3 team in the country, they lost to the number 20 team in the country, they lost to the number 1 team in the country, they lost to the number 8 team in the country. Actually, really good. They're not. They're 5-5. And Michigan is Indiana's best win, but the Hoosiers are 10-0, and they're off this week. And then they play Ohio State next week. And you know what? If they beat Ohio State next weekend, they're going to go to the Big Ten championship game because they've got Purdue the following week, and, well, probably don't stand a chance. So there is still a pathway for Indiana to bolster their college football resume. Have their wins been impressive? I mean, they have dominated their opponents outside of Michigan. But I think the same argument can be made for Texas. What has Texas done? And who has Texas beaten that makes you look at their resume and go, oh, wow. It doesn't exist. They don't have that. They're non-conference games. I think you could probably argue that the same best win for Indiana, Michigan, is the best win for Texas. You're going to count Vanderbilt as a 3-point win over Vanderbilt. And quick sidebar, I am a person who I don't believe that you can count a close loss as a resume builder, right? Like, well, Vanderbilt played Texas really close, therefore they're good. No, that's not really how it works. You either win the game or you didn't. And so I'm in the same boat. I don't think that you can say, well, Texas only beat Vanderbilt by 3. You either won the game or you did not. A bad win is a million times better than a great loss. And that's how it should be. I don't think everybody views it that way, but I will die on that hill of a win is a win is a win is a win is a win, no matter what. And a loss is a loss, no matter what extenuating circumstances, whatever happened. There was a plague and a plane landed, and like you game-winning field goal was going through the uprights, and the Auburn War Eagle came in, swooped it, and kicked it out of the air and dropped it to the ground. I don't care what happened. A win is a win is a win, and a loss is a loss is a loss is a loss. Indiana doesn't have a loss. Texas does. I don't think you can hold that against the Longhorns. Really, they played Georgia at home, and they lost. Georgia would be by far the best team on Indiana's schedule. But when you go through Texas's schedule thus far, what win makes you go like, yep, that's got to be a top 5 team in the country? Because it doesn't exist. It's not there. It is a mirage, a figment of your imagination. And so when Indiana fans, at first I thought, I think you're just bitching just a bitch. You should be happy that you are where you are. That the argument was that if we were Ohio State, Penn State, Michigan, Wisconsin, Iowa, Nebraska, USC, Oregon, Washington, UCLA, if we were in that group and we were 9-0, we would not be ranked number 8 in the country in the first college football playoff poll. We wouldn't be behind Tennessee and Penn State and Texas and Georgia and Ohio State. We would be ranked number 1 because we're 9-0. And at the time I was like, yeah, probably, but like, what does your resume have to show for it? And then you think like, okay, well, Texas is 8-1, and their big wins are Michigan, Oklahoma, who is, now not good. 6-4 Vanderbilt, 5-5 Oklahoma, 5-5 Michigan. Those are the marquee wins on Texas's schedule thus far. And so if you apply the idea that because Indiana hasn't really played anybody, because they haven't been challenged, because their schedule is not good, I think that same application has to apply to Texas. Is Texas's non-conference schedule better? Yes, somewhat significantly. Colorado State is not a juggernaut of a non-conference game, but you know what? They're 6-3. Texas went to Michigan. They then played UTSA, who's 4-5. But you know what? It sure beats Florida International, Western Illinois, and Charlotte. So I do think that there should be, a little bump up because Texas attempted to play somebody. The fact that Michigan now stinks because Jim Harbaugh took his ball to the NFL and took, 40 players with him to the league shouldn't be Michigan's fault. The intention was to play a big-time game on the road, and I think that matters because Indiana did not have that intent by scheduling Western Illinois, Florida International, and Charlotte. But if the argument is what win wows me on your schedule, Texas does not have anything to compete with that's much more significant than Indiana. Because if Texas is going to point to, we beat Michigan. Okay, so did Indiana. And so it kind of lends credence to the idea of if we were a blue blood, if we were even a B-tier program in the sport, we would not be ranked number 8 in the country. And they probably got a leg to stand on. But it's also why like a 12-team college football playoff is great in this situation, because if you were trying to fight for one of the final 4 spots, Indiana has to be perfect. Indiana has to be 12-0, 13-0, because the second they slip, and I'm of the belief that even should they fall to Ohio State, that it's not a 100% slam dunk that they are in the college football playoff. Texas wouldn't have to deal with that. Obviously, Texas has a loss, and they're ranked number 5. So I think it's important to be fair. I think it's important to make sure, especially, and I've mentioned this before, that in the first year of the college football playoff, everything you do sets a precedent. And so if you're going to apply, hey, you guys didn't beat anybody, which that's always been, I think, one of the things that I have lobbied for from the college football playoff committee is I don't necessarily care who you lost to, right? I want to know who the hell you beat that makes me think that you deserve to be here. And I've said in the same, like, if it was still a college football playoff when it was 4 teams this year, I would say to Texas fans, like, hey, you had your chance to prove that you belong to the top 4. When you played Georgia at home in mid-October, you had the opportunity to prove you're one of the 4 best teams in the country, and you didn't do it. Somebody else deserves that chance then. But that's not the world we live in anymore. So I don't think that it needs to be under that fine of a microscope. But I do think it's important that every time you decide something, you set a precedent. And so if you're saying you haven't beaten anybody that makes us go, wow, holy cow, that's a great team, and you say that about Indiana, I think you got to say it about Texas too. And I don't think we're doing that. And I think fairness matters. And I think intent matters. And I think applying things to one school but then not applying it to the other by kind of that metric, I think the committee very clearly does not respect Indiana's 9-0, 10-0. I think that's abundantly clear. But they do respect Texas's 8-1. And so when you're trying to get to the bottom of why that is, how much of it is, because clearly the AP thinks really highly of the Big Ten. 4 of the top 5 teams in the country are from the Big Ten. Is it the same for the college football playoff? And if you do think of the Big Ten as the best conference in America in 2024, I don't know how you then lobby against Indiana, who's undefeated in the biggest and best conference in the country. How you then say, well, we just don't think they're very good. I don't think I wish we could live in a world where eye test doesn't matter, because eye test is incredibly subjective. And obviously resumes are too. But resumes have concrete data. Resume has, you can use that data and manipulate it and make whatever case you want with it. But it's the facts. You can't just look at a Texas game, look at an Indiana game, or look at whoever's going to decide who's in spot number 11 and go, well, I just think that team looks like a better football team than this one. You got to have more than that. And thus far, I don't know that we have more than that. And I think that's an issue. And I think it's an issue that can rear its head in a situation where it doesn't have to. So does Texas have a significantly better resume than Indiana? In my thought, no, I don't think they do. But like Indiana, Texas has the chance to bolster that resume with a win over Texas A&M, with a potential game in the SEC championship game, with a win somehow over Arkansas. I thought Sam Pittman would have got fired by about Sunday, October 6th, but he didn't. So there are still chances for Texas to improve that resume, just like there are chances for Indiana to improve that resume. But I think you can make the argument that neither one of them has a win on that resume that makes you go, got to include this team in the top 12. But there's still time. Want to know your thoughts. Is Texas overrated, underrated? Am I stupid for thinking that they don't have a great win? Let me know in the comments down below. That'll do it for today's episode of the Daily Huddle. Appreciate you making us a part of your day, however it is, wherever it is you're doing so. If you're watching on YouTube, hit the subscribe button. Make sure you're getting all the great college football content we're pumping out. If you're listening on the podcast feed, drop a 5-star review. It goes a long way in helping out the channel. I'll see you tomorrow for another episode of the Daily Huddle.